are recording.
Here we are.
Here we are. All right. So, first question, where did the name Radial Gradient come from, and how does it relate to the subject matter of the play?
Yeah, I went through like several titles before landing on this one. They just didn't feel right. I wanted the title to speak to each of the three characters because the three women are equal parts of the piece. But I also wanted to acknowledge that while they're women of color, they have their own nuanced experience in the world. So it was hard to settle on like a phrase that captured that. But then in color theory, I read about a radial gradient, which is defined by a center point, an ending shape, and two or more color stop points. There's like more math involved as well, but the visual representation of that spoke to me in terms of identity and representation and presentation.
Cool. All right, great. Okay, second question. How does the play address complicity and the desire to create structural change?
Yeah, the play addresses structural, systemic forms of oppression that challenge like a good vibes only mindset. So the play does launch from that join and reform from the inside argument. However, in writing the piece, I kept questioning the validity of best intentions. In revising, I kept finding that the impact these characters had on their environment held weight. And while they may be women of color in a predominantly white institution, a role in itself that's politicized already, like the assimilation into white-centric forms of thinking means complicity and means gatekeeping. So while trying to root for these women, honoring the impact community becomes the play's focus, I think.
Great. Cool. Yeah, that the word complicity came up so much for me when I was reading it over again. I was like, how do I form this question? Because it's there, and I just wanted to I wanted to get your thoughts on that. So great. Okay, so cool. So final question. What is your experience with Greek life, and how did it inform your writing?
Yeah, I rushed with my then friend group at the beginning of freshman year of college at my very liberal, quote unquote, woke university. But Greek life at Northwestern is still Greek life. I was really uncomfortable living in the house and anxious, and eventually I knew I was deactivating. But I didn't want to move out in the middle of the year, so I had to wait until the spring, which meant I excused a lot of racism from girls I looked up to and was thought to be friends with along the way, including at Rush events. All of Rush has very specific rules and codes and consequences, which I found like extremely theatrical. And being on the other side of Rush, I kept lying to girls about the experience I was having in my sorority. And I think the first drafts of this play were really grappling with that guilt. This past spring, there's been this big push to abolish Greek life on campuses, but I think about the dues dollars that went to a national headquarters somewhere, and that harm like cannot be undone. Lily Padilla is a brilliant writer and once said in a talk back at the beginning of this school year that they wrote How to Defend Yourself to work through their own trauma in the hopes that eventually it might heal someone else in their audience. And that really stuck with me and is what I'm hoping for with this play. Because while writing Radial Gradient has not reversed my own actions, I think it's like how I've worked through them and kept myself accountable going forward.
Great.